Long speech there about what he thought about the Southport situation. He basically said that there are difficult questions that need to be answered over the Southport attack. He says they should not be burdened, in his words, by cultural or institutional sensitivities. Again, dancing around the words, right? No institution will be allowed to deflect from their failure, says the Prime Minister. We certainly know Prevent failed. We certainly know the police failed. The government will review the country's entire counter-terrorism system. Let's talk to Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, a very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning, Mike. What a terrible business this is.
It really is, isn't it? And I mean, it seems to have failed not only in the lead up to the horrible attacks that happened last year, but sort of after the arrest of the assailant, you know, because there was clearly information that the police had, which the government also had, which would have probably gone some way to at least inform the public, if nothing else. You know, this whole idea that somehow the police and the government have conspired to keep things away from the public, it's hard to get away from, because it sounds like they have.
It is absolutely so true. I mean, we're only looking at the photograph that you're displaying.
Yeah.
The fact that we were shown the the young cherub of a Welsh schoolboy.
Yeah.
Instead of that, where everybody else is arrested, they always release the mugshots. Keir Starmer keeps going. He couldn't reveal information because it had an impact on the trial. This is a man who accused everybody involved in the riots of far-right thuggery before they ever went to trial. So he was putting, motive into them before their trial. When we had IRA cases, everybody said it was the IRA before the trial. And
right.
It's often good to look at the opposite. So if a white skinhead had gone into a gang of young Asian girls and killed them, and he'd had a copy of Mein Kampf or whatever else at home, I've absolutely no doubt that those facts would be released to the press before or after the man was charged. And so with this, I think the public are right to be angry. And we have a society now, Mike, where people are whispering in corners because they're absolutely terrified of being accused of being racist or Islamophobic or these sort of words. And that's not a good place for society to be. When people feel that the government has been dishonest with them, it really is a terrible indictment on the establishment.
It really is, and I don't think that Keir Starmer's explanation of what happened is acceptable. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, I don't know if you heard what he said, he's not convinced either. You know, he seems to be dancing around the term terrorism. He didn't actually declare that he now believes Radu Kobana to be a terrorist. I think that's what he wanted to say, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. I don't see why not. I don't see why you need to change the law in order to call him a terrorist. It doesn't make any sense to me, in any way, shape or form. And so, he then talks about transparency. He wasn't transparent. He's admitted that he withheld information that it would not have been right to disclose, in his words. I'm not quite sure what the point of what he was saying was.
No, they've got a new phrase, haven't they? Extreme violence. He couldn't say terrorism, but he could say extreme violence about 5 or 6 times. And he's drawn a line in the sand 3 times. I don't believe any of this. This is the same establishment who covered up the grooming gangs. And they covered up the grooming gangs because the establishment have gone down the road of having a multicultural society where Trevor Phillips has identified there are people who live in complete segregation.
Yeah.
They live on their own, and these are often Muslim communities. We've got to be honest about this. And the fact that they had an Al-Qaeda manual, a jihadist manual, and they can't bring themselves to see what that means.
Right.
Unless we face a problem, you can never solve it. And the whole establishment are really railing against facing up to some awful facts here.
Yeah, because again, certain words that would not be used, certain words that could not be spoken by the Prime Minister. He's obviously, learning his lesson from the summer. He obviously now realises that what he said in the summer was probably wrong. We played it earlier on today when he referred to the problem of far-right thuggery, which seemed to bother him an awful lot more than the actual murder itself. He talks about, empathy in the community, and then he talks about the people who had their mosque attacked, coming together and fixing up their street. I mean, these are not things that people in this country want to hear. People in this country want to hear that there's going to be a crackdown on these terrorists that are in this country, some of whom have come here from other countries, some of whom were born here. We want to know that if there are 50 or 60,000 of these people, that they're all being watched very carefully and they're not going to be able to commit these kinds of crimes.
Absolutely, but the trouble is, I reckon there's so many of these people that the authorities simply cannot keep a track. How many young men have been referred to prevent 3 or more times? I imagine there's hundreds or thousands. We simply don't have the police or the security services to monitor that amount of people. And these successive governments have allowed this to happen. They've allowed people, and today people will arrive in this country from foreign places who we know nothing about. We don't know what crimes they want to commit or anything, and they'll be put into a hotel in Stoke or Bolton or some other poor old northern town, and these things may happen again.
Yeah.
And the establishment have created this problem, and they really don't like the public seeing the truth of it now. But it's like a bubble has burst with the grooming gang scandal, this wicked Southport murders. People can now see their eyes are open, and the government know that the people's eyes are open.
Exactly right. And the police have got to take some of the blame here as well, haven't they? I mean, one of the reasons, one of the things we were talking about earlier was the picture situation. You know, Chris Cabba, you know, the guy who was shot dead by the police in London, you know, the picture that's released of him when he was killed was this very happy-go-lucky looking guy. You know, the pictures that emerged later on from the policeman's trial showed a very different picture of a very bad-looking gangster, right? And then suddenly you've got this picture of Rudy Cabana as a schoolboy being released by the police. I mean, what's the process there? I mean, who decides what picture gets released?
Well, they have like a goal group, and so these sort of inquiries, which involve something very, very political, will be headed by an assistant chief constable or a commander in the Met. And all these people come from the same left-leaning establishment. These are people who've been promoted on celebrating diversity rather than catching criminals. And when these things occur involving ethnic minorities, it really leaves them in a quandary, because it just goes against everything they believe in. Because what they believe in is that crime is down to right-wing thuggery and skinheads and things like this.
Yeah.
And it just confuses their minds. If you remember the Daleks, when they cannot compute, this is what these people are like when they see this sort of thing, and they try to deflect it, as you say, by releasing these images which are completely at variance to how the person really is.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, in terms of the way the police have been operating in all sorts of other ways, you know, I mean, we saw a ridiculous report the other day about, I think it was South Yorkshire Police, who apparently didn't investigate so many of the grooming gang problems because they were supposedly concentrating on car theft and burglary. Well, I'm sorry, I haven't seen any figures that show an incredible sort of, you know, pickup rate of arrests and solving of crimes in those particular areas. So I don't buy that one for a moment. But there must have been some police order issued to police operatives to not say certain things, to not release certain pictures, to not give certain impressions. I mean, that's obviously a sort of, you know, embedded situation now, isn't it?
I'll put my personal experience, Mike. I used to choose I used to circulate a document called Caught on Camera, and we used to decide on the front page, and the front page was the worst crime and the best image. And I had a message through to me saying, put more white people on the front.
Yeah.
That was the order I got at Scotland Yard. That's how they control things. So it wasn't a case of, right, you've got a bad murderer here, just put the worst murderer, the best image, see if you can get an identification. That order came through to me. Right. I was with a superintendent, and we had a page about robbery, we had a report about robbery, and it had one page which described that most of the suspects were black. She ripped that page out. And it was so obvious. One of the people looking at it said, well, there's a page missing here. Right. But that's how desperate these people are, because the police control people by the promotion process, really. And if you say and do the wrong things, I suppose like me, you don't get so high. And that's the controlling factor they have.
Right. And that is the problem, because that's clearly been going on. You know, people now that I speak to on a daily basis will say to me, you know, if there's an incident, whether it's a serious crime, whether it's a suspected terrorist offence, if the name of the individual isn't published straight away, everybody just assumes it's likely to be an immigrant. It might be an illegal immigrant, it might not be an immigrant at all. But, you know, it's almost as though the police, if they see a name which they believe might in some way refer to a community in this country that they don't think should be somehow blamed for things, they just won't give the name out.
It is, and as you say, it just becomes laughable, doesn't it? I remember it started when I was a young PC. The South London Press, if it didn't say what colour somebody was,
Right.
then you knew what they were.
Yeah.
You know, and you see it all the time that the police make an appeal. Oh, there's been a vicious robbery, there's been a vicious rape or whatever, and then they don't give a description. Well,
Right.
sure, you need to give a description because then people will help you catch them. And a couple of years ago, there was a man running around Birmingham stabbing people,
Right.
and he hadn't been caught.
Right.
And the police did not put out a description of him, and it was obvious why they didn't put out a description. And I just think the public now are catching on to this, and it's becoming more, thankfully, we can talk about it on the likes of Talk, and we can say these things, because in the past we would have been shut down straight away.
Yeah.
Right-wing racism,
Right.
Islamophobia, all these accusations would have been thrown at us. But I think I'm really pleased now that we can have an honest discussion about this, because there are real problems in society. If the levels of crime committed by immigrants was actually, the truth was revealed, people would be appalled.
Yeah.
But the truth is hidden. If you watch a TV show or something, it doesn't reflect reality at all.
Exactly right. And we already know the Home Office has been withholding certain statistical information because they don't want us to know precisely what the level of crime is from different communities. Listen, Mike, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector there, telling us precisely where the problems lie inside of the police. Let's talk to Paul, who's in Fife. Hello, Paul.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning. What can I do for you?
Mike, just to raise a point about the terrible Southport murders. I haven't heard any commentary about this. I would ask the question, my question would be this: if this had been an extreme far-right maniac who had went into a Muslim school, had slaughtered some little Muslim girls, and very, very shortly after that event happened, it was discovered that this extreme far-right maniac had been on the prevent list 3 times. When they had went into his house and searched it, they had found extreme far-right material and ricin poison.
Yeah.
Do you not think that the authorities would have put out a warning to the broader Muslim community? Because at that time, they didn't know that this Rabbi Kanu guy was working on his own or was member of a group. They would have erred on the side of caution, quite rightly, and alerted the Muslim community, and they would have been police officers on the gates of every Muslim school in the country until such times as the authorities were satisfied that this guy was a lone wolf.
Yeah, I mean, what's wrong?
Why did that not happen in this case, Mike?
Well, you know the answer to that, Paul, as well as I do. The fact remains they could have easily said, we are treating this as a terrorist incident, but we believe he was acting alone. That would have been enough to at least assuage people's fears, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely.
But they